Greetings from Seton Hall University in New Jersey, USA, to all Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. In other words, the whole world is one family. Quoting Maha Upanishad, today this sentiment becomes especially true as people from different corners of the world are coming together to participate in our virtual symposium co-hosted with colleagues from Singapore on the Bhagavad Gita and humanity today. My name is Professor Amar Dev Amar, and today we are honored to bring together experts on the Bhagavad Gita to share the Hindu, Catholic, Jewish, Islamic, and Buddhist insights and questions. In fact, this symposium welcomes voices from a wide range of global spiritual traditions. Conducting a collaborative international symposium like this one is not new for Seton Hall University. We are comprehensive national research university with 10 colleges, and we pursue a Catholic religion mission to provide a home for enriching mind, heart, and spirit. A symposium of this kind we are conducting today is a sample of how we achieve this end. Since 2006, our curriculum has integrated Bhagavad Gita study for all freshman students working for their bachelor's degrees across all colleges. The Bhagavad Gita is an episode, book 6, chapters 23 to 40 of the Indian epic the Mahabharata, which according to a recent computer model from research done at Louisiana State University is timed circa 3137 BCE, making it more than 5,000 years old. It has 200,000 verses, giving it the distinction to be by far the world's largest epic, many multiple longer than Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, even when they are combined. There is so much to learn and there is so much wisdom in the Mahabharata. That is why it is called the fifth Veda within Hinduism. Several of our speakers will cover humanity today since it is our theme. We will all get to learn about the Bhagavad Gita's connection to human life. Let me get you started by covering from the Bhagavad Gita approaches humanity. I have noticed that the Bhagavad Gita has guided human behavior, social systems, and intellectual traditions in many parts of the world by placing the greatest emphasis on dharma, a word, a compendium of many English language words, means that is right to do or ought to be done. Bhagavad Gita uses dharma to guide all action, that is karma. It also covers mansa, that is thought, and vachana, that is words or speech. And these three words, mansa, vachana, karma, appear together in the Mahabharata 13.8.16 and place a special emphasis on letting dharma guide the humanity for all three of them. The word dharma conveys duty, responsibility, expected, ethical, etc., pertaining to mansa, vachana, karma. However, it's in essence for all three of these, it means what is right, what is nature of reality, right behavior, and social order, etc. It was the decline of dharma that resulted in the cataclysmic war described in the Mahabharata, and fortunately for humanity, also yielded the first recitation of the Bhagavad Gita. This is what is known as Gita Jayanti, for the celebration of which Dr. Charles Chow of Singapore approached me for the co-hosted symposium. The Bhagavad Gita has been the instrument for the revival of Dharma by Lord Krishna, the eighth incarnation of Vishnu, the Hindu identity for the ultimate amalgamation of all powers. Lord Krishna describes the conditions for when such a revival takes place in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 7 and 8. And it is translated by Swami Vivekananda, and I'm going to read the translation. When our virtue subsides and wickedness prevails, I manifest myself to establish virtue, to destroy evil, to save the good, and I come from Yuga age to Yuga age. Today, we are advancing humanity's duty to establish virtue and preserve the good by co-hosting this 2020 International Gita Symposium. It is with great honor that I officially say welcome to everyone. And now offer a special welcome to our next speaker, Chairman D. Srinivasan of Singapore's Gita Jayanti Committee. He is a chartered accountant by profession and has served as the director of Singapore operations in a multinational trading company for 20 years. He also serves as the general manager and financial advisor for a group of companies with diversified operations in Southeast Asia. Srinivasan is also active in the religious and music circles, serving in positions on Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society, Singapore Dakshin Bharata Brahma Sabha, and most recently Gita Jayanti as the chairman of the HEB Hindu Endowment Board Subcommittee. He will offer formal greetings to the audience on behalf of our international partners and will be followed by our event co-host, Dr. Mike Stebbins, Seton Hall's Tath Lanagren Distinct Professor of Interdisciplinary Studies. Chairman Srinivasan, welcome.
Hari Om. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome all the panelists, revered speakers, and the delegates joining all across the globe to this International Gita Symposium, jointly organized by Gita Jayanti Singapore and Seton Hall University, USA. This is something unique that Gita Jayanti has attempted in its activities for spanning over last 2 decades. The Gita Jayanti conducts various programs throughout the year, like competitions, Gita Forum, cultural programs, Gita Parayan, culminating in Gita Havan. The pandemic situation prevailing across the globe has made most of our programs go virtual. And in the place of International Gita Forum that is usually held in this part of the time, we have partnered with Seton Hall University to conduct this Gita Symposium. Going virtual is something not new to Gita Jayanti Singapore because it itself has been a virtual organization where over 30 Indian organizations, temples in Singapore have come together to conduct the various events listed above. So, Gita is a timeless teaching, and it's set as a dialogue between a student who is not inhibited in asking any questions and the teacher who gives all the answers very patiently to him. And the teachings are relevant to anyone, anywhere, regardless of their upbringing, their beliefs, their locations, and their cultural backgrounds. It gives you a solution that can be applied to any situation in life. To me, however, the beauty of Gita lies in the ultimate part where Krishna says to Arjuna, "You have listened to me attentively to all my teachings, and I have shared my wisdom with you. Now you mull over and decide to act as appropriate, not making it as a commandment, but as a suggestion to him." So let's also listen, like Arjuna, very attentively to the final expositions of the wisdom to be shared by the knowledgeable scholars and take away our messages home beautifully. I now request Dr. Mike Stubbins to take over as moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Srinivasan. Greetings and a warm welcome to all of you who are attending today's symposium. First, I would like to review briefly today's program. As you can see on the slide, we will have a series of presentations, beginning with John Radwin, Ph.D., giving an opening talk on the Bhagavad Gita and interreligious inclusivity. He will be followed by Rabbi Alan Brill speaking on Bhagavad Gita and interfaith theology. Then Swami Sarvapriyananda will give a presentation on the Bhagavad Gita applied to mankind today. Next, Swami Samachittananda will speak on the Bhagavad Gita and spiritual life. Our final presentation will be given by Professor Vanita Sinha on the Bhagavad Gita, Manual for Modern Living. After the presentations, there will be opportunities for the speakers to answer questions. We thank you for the many excellent questions some of you submitted prior to the symposium. Several of those questions have been selected, and I will pose them to the speakers. At the conclusion of this question period, Mr. Mohammed Imran of the Center for Interfaith Understanding in Singapore will provide a vote of thanks, and then Dr. Amar will formally close our symposium. Now, before we begin the presentations, I want to mention that we are very interested in finding out what you are learning as a result of your participation in this symposium. We would like you to answer a pre-symposium question. Please go now to the control ribbon on your screen and click on the icon near the right end of the ribbon that has a question mark on it. This will open a chat stream where you will see the pre-symposium question. It states, "I have ideas about how the Bhagavad Gita can apply to contemporary life. Please indicate your response to that statement. Do you strongly agree with the statement? Agree with it? Are you uncertain about it? Do you disagree with it, or do you strongly disagree with it?" Thank you for taking a moment to do that right now. We will ask the question a second time at the end of the symposium. In addition, there will be one or more questions posted after each of the presentations in the same place that will attempt to gauge what you just learned from that presentation. We kindly request that you answer these as well. Now let's begin with our first presentation. John Radwin is Director of the Institute for Communication and Religion in Seton Hall University's College of Communication and the Arts. He earned a BA in Communication from the University of New Hampshire, an MA in Communication Studies from Northern Illinois University, and a PhD in Speech Communication from Penn State University. His teaching and research focus on the intersection of rhetoric and religion, examining how ancient traditions influence contemporary public discourse. The title of his presentation is The Bhagavad Gita and Interreligious Inclusivity. Welcome, Dr. Radwin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stebbins. I'd like to start off my talk today with a quote from chapter 4 of the Gita, the Yoga of Wisdom. "However men try to reach me, I return their love with my love. Whatever path they may travel, it leads to me in the end. Now, in this passage, Krishna is very inclusive, welcoming and loving everyone along their spiritual journeys. In my talk today, I want to focus on this communication theme of inclusivity across religious traditions. And so I have 4 points to develop. First, I'll give an overview to the Gita for anybody who might be unfamiliar with it. Next, I'll talk about the transition in educational philosophy from the 20th to the 21st century. I'll follow that by focusing in on interreligious communication and its importance today. And then I'll zero down on the Gita itself to show how it teaches us about how sages include people from other religions. Overall, my message today is that inclusivity is truly a global spiritual value. So to begin here, the Bhagavad Gita, if you're not familiar with it, is translated as Song of the Blessed One. And I'm using the Stephen Mitchell translation from the year 2000. It's from the 2nd century BCE. It's originally in Sanskrit, and it integrates multiple Hindu philosophies. Now, it's poetic. It's not a philosophical treatise. It's a song of 700 verses across 18 chapters. And for the setting, it's immediately before an epic battle. Prince Arjuna feels despair, and Krishna shares divine guidance on how to live. Now, here I've selected a passage from chapter 9, where Krishna describes himself to show some of the poetic power of this text. I am the beginning and the end, origin and dissolution, refuge, home, true lover, womb, and imperishable seed. So here poetry and song transcend the limits of ordinary language. Artistic imagery points to divine meaning beyond duality. So this quote from chapter 9 on the secret of life reaches past linguistic categories to describe how God is all that is or is not, and is both being and non-being, and what is beyond them both. So one of the steps towards spiritual maturity is expanding our understanding of God, and the language here unites opposites with diverse and vivid imagery. Now, I'll share a lot more Gita quotes with you today, but first let's discuss why it's important to study the Gita. It's due to a shift in education we've seen in advancing from the 20th to the 21st century. What we're seeing here is a change in the modern approach to the postmodern approach. In the modern era of the 19th and 20th centuries, knowledge and education tended to be specialized, partial, and strive for independence. Whereas now we see that a systems approach where we get a holistic view of how knowledge is integrated is really quite essential. And this is parallel to changes in our views of culture, where the 19th century might have stressed uniformity, division, and even inclusivity. Today's focus is on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know this very well because Dean Yates appointed me to the task force for our College of Communication and the Arts on equity, diversity, and inclusion. We chose to adopt a statement from the National Arts Educators Association, and here's the definition of inclusion. Inclusion describes proactive, intentional, and thoughtful engagement with diversity to the extent that all have the ability to contribute fully and effectively throughout the community. And so I emphasized the communication elements here: proactive, intentional, and thoughtful engagement so that everyone can contribute. And so when you take inclusivity seriously, this means that religions should be included. And so this is a pluralistic approach to education that we're working with now in the 21st century. Now, this is especially true here at Seton Hall University. We're a Catholic institution, and when you see religions from the outside, they may seem rigid and monolithic, but when you study them more closely as social movements, you see that they change and grow. And so Catholicism has been changing and growing for nearly 2,000 years, over 2,000 years. And Vatican II in the 1960s was a key turn along the Catholic journey that we're still working with today. There were two themes from Vatican II, aggiornamento and ressourcement. First, with aggiornamento, that's Italian for updating. And with our topic today, the Church released in 1965 a document called Nostra Aetate, In Our Time, that officially said to turn to non-Christian religions and learn from them. So here's a quote on light and truth. The Church regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings, which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all. And so here it's saying that the religious traditions are both the same and different. They can be the same in the truth and light sense and different in particular teachings. And then I'm extra familiar with this document because I am honored to serve as the director for the Institute for Communication and Religion in the College of Communication and the Arts at Seton Hall. And we adopted a later quote from Section 2 of Nostra Aetate as part of our mission statement. Our goal is dialogue and collaboration across diverse religious lines so that we can recognize, preserve, and promote the good things, spiritual and moral, as well as the socio-cultural values found. And so that's part of the impetus for our symposium today. Now, the ressourcement theme from Vatican II says to go back to your core, go back to your heart. And in scriptural traditions, those are texts. And when you take Nostra Aetate seriously, those texts are vastly expanded. It's not just texts from your own tradition, it's texts from multiple traditions. And then spiritual practice becomes study and discussion. And so today I'm going to focus in on the Bhagavad Gita and how it teaches us about the portrait of the sage. In order to do that, I've selected this painting. In 2019, this inclusivity painting was competitively selected and produced as large-scale public art by the Arts and Culture Commission of the city of Ferndale, California, and it was painted by 16-year-old artist Daphne Wilson. In an interview, Wilson described her artistic goal of having every face feature every single color within the painting. She said, quote, "Each one has the same color that ties to one of the other faces. It's kind of like everything is connected throughout this one similar trait. We all share something." Now, this compositional approach was informed by her deep understanding of community. She continued, quote, "You can't be inclusive without accepting everything. In a community, you have to be accepting of all different types of people, no matter where they come from or where they're going, including anyone's story in a piece of art. You just want to be able to include anyone that might be present or might be seeing it or influenced by it." So Daphne Wilson's work was formally honored and publicly installed because she is reflecting rays of truth about accepting everything and everyone. She is an enlightened sage who helps us all understand community and inclusivity. And so she's a present day sage and artist, and she's my transition to the Gita's ancient portrait of the sage. The two portraits are similar because light is light no matter what age you're living in. Now for the Gita, first, Krishna is very clear that enlightened people treat each other as equals. Wise men regard all beings as equal. This is not a complex idea like transcendence or selflessness or a deep metaphor like imperishable seeds. It's a straightforward statement of how enlightened people approach and communicate with others. Now the contrast, the opposite, is with division. The Gita teaches to let go of all fruits, let go of the fruit of desire, and especially let go of anger and greed. And so here's a quote that gets that idea across. "He who has let go of hatred, who treats all beings with kindness and compassion, who is always serene, unmoved by pain or pleasure, free of the I and mine, self-controlled, firm, and patient, his whole mind focused on me, that man is the one I love best." And so in this one, I emphasized free of the I and mine. The Gita teaches us how to get over ourselves, to free yourself from yourself. And this can be a challenge, but one key practice to do this is to take a look at your action and your communication. Instead of making it about you, make it about worship. And so here's a quote from chapter 11 that gets that idea across. "He who acts for my sake, loving me, free of attachment, with benevolence toward all beings, will come to me in the end." So this brings us to one of my really favorite passages from the Gita, the last 4 verses of Krishna's first monologue in chapter 6, the Yoga of Meditation. I like it because they marvelously sum up the inclusivity themes that we've been discussing by describing how a sage who is spiritually enlightened relates to others, the universe, and God. So first, on the human level, as we mentioned, humans need to get over themselves and become selfless. The way to do this is to have an inclusive approach to identity. So mature in yoga, impartial everywhere that he looks, he sees himself in all beings and all beings in himself. This can be a challenging concept to visualize, but if you look to the right, you'll see the image from Claire Evans, a Seton Hall graphic design student. She did this for our Religious Harmony event last year. Each circle is impossible to distinguish. Each circle sees itself in all the other circles, and all the other circles see themselves within each circle. The second one is on God. God's universality is communicated through omnipresence and immanence. And so the man who sees me in everything and everything within me will not be lost to me, nor will I ever be lost to him. And so we've got a similar theme at the God level and the human level, and then 631 pulls them together for a human divine mystical unity. He who is rooted in oneness realizes that I am in every being. Wherever he goes, he remains in me. And then for the final line of Krishna's first monologue in chapter 6, we get a lesson on spiritual practice. It involves working on how we see one another and how we see the world and how we see God. Spiritual practice involves seeing equality and shared identity. When he sees all beings as equal in suffering or in joy because they are like himself, that man has grown perfect in yoga. So to try and summarize, I'm going to come to my last slide next. I've spoken today about how the Gita is an ancient spiritual masterpiece that has become part of our Catholic journey here at Seton Hall. The inclusive aggiornamento movement of Vatican II turned toward non-Christian religions with sincere regard, and through discussion and study of the Gita today, we learn about a broad and inclusive tradition of spirituality. Now, the two traditions I've discussed today are both the same and different. Inclusivity is a shared global spiritual value important to both, and they both regard humanity as a global family. This is the theme that Dr. Amar started us with from the Maha Upanishad. The world is one family. Now, for differences, St. Paul's mystical body simile is an important take on Christian unity. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. So here St. Paul integrates different members organically. The Gita's tradition will point to the enlightened sage who identifies so completely that he disappears into God. The wise man, cleansed of his sins, who has cut off all separation, who delights in the welfare of all beings, vanishes into God's bliss. And so with this, I'll point you to our second audience survey question. It'll be there in the chat feed in just a second. And to conclude, similarities establish shared direction and light. Differences offer opportunities for discussion, and working together, we can learn that inclusivity is a global spiritual value for engaging 21st century knowledge and education. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Radwin, for opening up the important theme of inclusivity for us. Our next speaker is Rabbi Alan Brill. His presentation is on Bhagavad Gita and Interfaith Theology. He's the Cooperman Ross Endowed Chair for Jewish Christian Studies at Seton Hall University, where he teaches Jewish Studies in the Department of Religion and the Jewish Christian Studies graduate program. He specializes in interfaith theology, Jewish mysticism, modern Jewish thought, and contemporary Jewish orthodoxy. And he offers courses in medieval and modern Jewish thought, Jewish mysticism, interfaith encounter, and Jewish theology. He will speak about Bhagavad Gita and interfaith theology. Rabbi Brill, welcome.
Rabbi Brill, you're muted. There you go.
Yeah. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great Jewish theologian who died in 1972, that Judaism would look very differently if it had situated itself on the river Ganga, putting itself in an Indian context. And the question is, what was he trying to envision? What was he getting you to think about? Elsewhere, Heschel talks about how Judaism can learn from the Hindu categories of the Hindu epics, in which Krishna takes a sense of duty being the charioteer in order to come to Arjuna. And the fact that when you look at the biblical story of God walking in the garden, it may make more sense if we compare it to Hindu epics. When I taught in India, I was teaching Judaism, and in the class, the Hindu professor who was sitting in on my lecture jumped up and said, "Oh, the biblical stories are God in search of man, and have a lot to do with things that I know from the epic traditions. And so today I'm going to point out in my brief time a little bit about the commonality of wisdom of human life and duty. And this is what I see in the Gita. I'm going to do a few comparisons, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about comparative method. So turning now to the Bhagavad Gita directly is turning to the charioteer. Arjun expresses his doubts, and the driver reveals himself first as Lord Krishna and then as the infinite divine. And the rest of the book is conversations on ethics, duties, liberation, the service of God. But in the end, he is told to fulfill his duty and to serve for a higher cause. And the Bhagavad Gita ideas will play a good role in commonalities. So one takeaway from the Bhagavad Gita is the importance of the path of karma, which upholds the necessity of action undertaken without attachment to the works or desire for results. That inaction in action and action in inaction. Therefore, one should not withdraw from the world or social involvement, but rather live in the world. Always act with attachment to the fruits of action. The one who is acting without attachment attains God. Now, these are very similar to Jewish ideas, the Jewish idea on duty. The Jewish word halakha, following the path, is very similar to the Hindu word dharma. In the Jewish book, Chapters of the Fathers, it says explicitly, do not be like servants who do their duty for reward, but do your duty to serve your master without an expectation of reward. Elsewhere in the same book, it talks about how Jewish duties should be done for their own sake. Okay? Judaism is about following this path of doing duties for its own sake. And it's not about running from action, but it's from embracing action. Surprisingly now, in a more multicultural world in which people are more educated about other scriptures, in 2009, Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, a major Orthodox Jewish rabbi, addressed his yeshiva with quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, all relating to karma. And he says that action, he stressed that action alone has a right and never at all to its fruits. Let not the fruits of action be thy motive, neither let there be any attachment in inaction. I mean, he's quoting this as a way to see your Judaism and learn from it. He also quoted the verse, with the body, the mind, with the intellect, even with the senses, perform all your actions in self-purification, beyond attachment. And there's that deep commonality in the true traditions. And both Judaism and the Bhagavad Gita have different paths of jnana, karma, bhakti, which I can go into. Judaism is the path of Torah study. It is the path of devotion, of bhakti. It is the path of fulfilling your duty, doing the mitzvot, following halakha. And I could say much on these. Give me another hour. But I want to turn to specifically the divine part, the theophany. That the Bhagavad Gita contains a chapter where Arjuna asks to see God's glory, his full infinite form, which almost directly parallels his Moses' request to see God's glory after the giving of the Torah in Exodus 33. In the Gita, however, Arjuna indeed receives a vision of God as the infinite encompassing of all the universe, the omniform, while Moses is told he can only see God from behind through God's actions on earth. Moses is told the human eye cannot see the infinite eye, while Arjuna is also told that he cannot see God with human eyes, but he needs to be given unlimited mystical eyes. And that mystical tradition then in Judaism, starting with the visions of Isaiah and Ezekiel, give visions of what the divine is. And when the omniform reveals itself, we have the verses in chapter 11. You cannot see me with your present eyes, therefore I give you divine eyes, by which you can behold my mystic opulence. Now, what do these visions mean? And this is important if you're going to do comparisons, is I'm one of those who always emphasize going to commentaries. I'm not one of those who just do straight readings, but commentaries are important. Ramanuja points out on this point is at that point, Arjuna attained a knowledge of wisdom, power, sovereignty, splendor of everything in the natural order, animal, vegetable, mineral. And Nachmanides, the 13th century Jewish thinker and Kabbalist, has that same vision, that visions of the divine include the whole natural order. If I turn to another commentary, Madhva, is about how everything should be manifest in everything else, and that you see all variations in the form really come back to one essence. And I want you to remind you that if one compares this to the Jewish Kabbalah, that also teaches you see a divine form in everything, and that everything you should not separate the shoots, as they say, by seeing each form as separate. And the Bhagavad Gita has served as a model for a vision for Jewish texts in a while. So, for example, the Orthodox Rabbi Eliezer Berkowitz, in his book God, Man, and History, asked about the inherent chasm between the human person and the divine, saying, how can we stand in the presence of the divine source of all energy and power in the universe? And he quotes the Bhagavad Gita about 1,000 suns would arise tomorrow morning, about the divine infinite that we've got to in some way understand within our reality. So to summarize my brief telling of stories here, we have to compare the biblical story to the Gita. The comparison of duty and detachment and not for reward is common in both. There are paths of intellect, action, devotion, the great theophany. We both emphasize seeing the divine in the natural order and the divine beyond the differentiation. But I want to now turn to the interfaith aspect. Interfaith today is less about two opposing sides viewing each other and much more about the approach of comparative theology. Is that one starts with the teaching of one's own tradition and with a desire for having knowledge about the other tradition and about confronting one's own faith, one actually learns about the other tradition. And the field now of comparative theology as interfaith does not think about general meaning of religious diversity or religious inclusivism. Instead, thinks about specific texts, specific motifs, specific claims, and ask how it resonates on your own tradition, and ask what you can learn from it beyond just saying we want to be inclusive. It's an activity of faith-seeking understanding, confronting the world in which we live. The encounter of the two religions pushes me to new possibilities of thinking about Judaism or Hinduism. Beyond that, observing the diversity of human religious life, similar and different from one's own, teaches one about the broader issues of religious life. Perhaps in the culmination, God transforms the self. In seeking wisdom, we are see ourselves anew. Understanding only emerges, I can't emphasize enough, from particular texts, doctrines, ideas, and the process demands humility and being willing to be open to others. Is that you note both the similarities and the differences, and only in this way can there be mutual understanding, full of challenge, correction, enrichment for both religions. We learn about the others not from within our own tradition, but by going out to learn from the other religion. We have to see we're not all the same and different, not all the same, but recognize the difference. And we have to bear in mind that we don't compare apples to oranges, myth to law, mysticism to rationality. We compare like to like. And our goal is to begin and clear up the misconceptions on both sides and then attain understanding. In conclusion, hospitality, a term stressed by the Jewish thinker Emmanuel Levinas, is openness to a new perspective through leaving one's safe precinct. One important element in approaching other faiths is the need to go out of one's comfort zone. One actually needs to meet someone of the other faith, placing oneself in a situation where one may be confronted by new perspective. One needs to see, meet, talk, and enter the realm of the other, accept their hospitality, and offer it to others. In an age of globalization, people now have increasing contact with other faiths through business and immigration. When I explain Hinduism in Jewish terms, I'm looking at it with Jewish eyes and ask what they mean to a Jewish observer. And I ask my listeners today to consider opening themselves up to new ways of looking at other religions and thereby gaining new possibilities of thought.
Thank you, Rabbi Brill. I invite every attendee to please respond to the Rabbi's survey question on the right. Now, I have the privilege of introducing a person who was known as the university's Swami in India and the Harvard Hindu monk in the USA. He is Swami Sarvapriyananda, the minister and spiritual leader of Vedanta Society of New York of Ramakrishna Mission. I had the opportunity to meet and share stage with him in September 2015 at the High Commission of India in London for the conference on the Bhagavad Gita, its contemporary relevance. I was so much impressed by the depth of his understanding of the so ancient, so intricate Hindu scriptures and invited him to visit Seton Hall University and talk to students and faculty. That was the start of our relationship with him. I had the opportunity to visit his center in Los Angeles when he was heading Los Angeles Center. From there on, we collaborated on projects for the Academy of Management, among others. His vast visit and vast experience today with us is one of them. He has been always available to us, and we are so thankful to have him with us today. I present Swami Sarvapriyananda. Please welcome him.
Thank you so much, Professor Amar. Thank you for having me here. I hope you can all see the presentation. So today I'd like to speak about a subject which is of interest to all of us. What does the Bhagavad Gita say about self-management? Of how do we apply the knowledge that we gain from the Bhagavad Gita in our day-to-day lives? The question that I want to deal with is this. We have so much knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita itself gives us a vast amount of wisdom. Our religious traditions, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, and all of this has given us a vast heritage of spiritual knowledge. For positive psychology, in the last 20 to 30 years, has developed as a prominent academic discipline, and it inquires into the positive aspects of human psychology, into human flourishing. So with all of this knowledge, we notice something interesting, that it's not very easy to change ourselves. Why is it so difficult to be good? Why is it so difficult to do good in spite of knowing so much? So this is the question which actually Arjuna asks Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 3rd chapter, in the 36th verse, Arjuna asks this question. I'll read out the Sanskrit. Arjuna says, Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi vashneya baladiva niyojitaha. Says, oh Krishna, why does a person do wrong things, even though he or she may not want to, even as if unwillingly we are pushed into doing wrong things? What makes us do this? Now, the form of the question is important because it's very interesting that the villain in the Mahabharata, Duryodhana, he in fact expressed similar sentiments. In an encounter with Krishna, he says to Krishna, the villain, Duryodhana, says that don't try to teach me dharma, because I know what is dharma, I know what is right, I know what is wrong, and I even know that what I'm doing is not right. I know what I'm doing is wrong. That's not my problem. My problem is that though I know what is right, I don't feel like doing it. And though I know what is wrong, I can't stop myself from doing it. So notice one thing though, Duryodhana did not put this in the form of a question. He put it as an accomplished fact, and this is just a fact of life and there's nothing to be done about it. So the Mahabharata probably wants to say that the difference between the hero and the villain is this quality of asking, is this willingness to learn and change. Arjuna says the same thing as Duryodhana, that why do we do wrong things even if we don't want to? But he asks it in the form of a question, expressing his willingness to learn and change. I think that makes all the difference between the villain and the hero. What was Krishna's answer? In the 37th verse of the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhenam Iha Vairinam. He says, O Arjuna, it is desire, it is anger, which is born of Rajaguna, which is all devouring, which is greatly evil. That is the real enemy here. That is the real enemy in spiritual life, in our day-to-day life. So the answer in itself is not unique. In all the religious traditions of the world, even in modern positive psychology, it is the desire which is not managed. It is the desire which is uncontrolled and runs amok that becomes devastating in our lives. Here he noticed that he says it is desire and anger, but later on we'll see that it collapses the whole thing into just unmanaged desire itself. Its simple insight is that desire, when it is frustrated, I want something and I don't get it, then it becomes anger. If desire is fulfilled, it becomes greed. So fulfilled desire gets transformed into greed, and unfulfilled desire, frustrated desire, gets transformed into anger. But at the root, the problem is desire. Now, the interesting thing lies in the solution that Krishna gives, and that's what I shall concentrate on in this presentation. So what is the solution to this question, that why, to this problem of desire? Remember, the question was, we know so many things. Why can't we do it in our day-to-day lives? Why can't we transform it into practice? And the answer given by Krishna is that at the root of all these problems lies unchecked or unmanaged desire. Now, what is the method that Krishna suggests to overcome this problem of desire and enable us to put all our wisdom into practice and to transform our lives and to make our lives blessed? So the answer is, the methodology is very interesting. In the 42nd verse, so I'm going to jump back and forth in the verses. In the 42nd verse, Krishna actually imports something from the Upanishads. In the Kathopanishad, we find the model of the human person as a chariot. Compare the body to a chariot and the senses to the 5 senses, the sensory system, to the 5 horses which are pulling the chariot, which are powering the chariot. And with the senses, we see the sense objects. We see form, we hear sound, we smell, we taste, we touch. So these are the objects, like the lanes of the road on which the horses are running. Excuse me. And the senses are controlled by the mind. Imagine the horses, and the charioteer is holding the reins, which controls the horses. And the reins are the mind. The charioteer, the one who's driving the chariot, is compared to the intellect. And beyond the intellect, so this is where the Vedantic concept of the self, the Atman comes in. The real person, the real I, is not the body, the chariot, not even the senses, the horses, not even the driver of the chariot, the charioteer, but the rider who is sitting in the chariot, for whom the whole thing is happening. The chariot is running around along the road for the purposes of the one who is sitting in the chariot. Now, the verse in the Gita, let me read out the Sanskrit. This is 42nd. But remember, this actually is a sort of a quote from the Kathopanishad. It says, Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu para buddhi yo buddhe paratastu sa. The 42nd verse. And here we see the chariot model of the person. This was a kind of analogy used quite often in ancient civilizations. We find it not only in India, in Vedanta and Hinduism. You find it in Buddhism. Chandrakirti, the great Buddhist philosopher, uses the chariot model. You find it in ancient Greece too. So here the senses are compared to the horses, and the mind to the reins, and the intellect to the driver, and the self to the rider. It's difficult to translate it exactly. I wanted to say passenger, but that sounds more like taking an Uber or something like that. But so I just decided to go with the rider. It just means the real self. The apparent self is the whole chariot. We identify ourselves with the body, with the senses, with the mind, and even with the intellect. But what Vedanta and Krishna wants to tell us is the real you is the consciousness, is the awareness, is the Atman who is shining in this body-mind system. It's almost as if you are sitting in a car and you forget yourself and you think you are the car. Well, we are not the car, we are not the chariot, we are not the body, we are not the senses or the mind or the intellect. We are the consciousness ever shining in this body-mind system. So that's what Krishna wants to suggest here. Now, how do you apply this? So here I'm going to jump back into verse number 41. Krishna gives a 3-step approach to applying this model in order to get our desires under control. So what are the steps? Verse number 41. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajayenam jnana vijnana nashanam. So he says, oh Arjuna, start with the outermost. Restrain the senses first. This is the way to control unchecked desire. First, management of the senses. What does it mean? We must manage the sensory input. What goes into the senses? The first place to start to begin this process of self-management is to manage the senses. What do we see? What do we hear? What do we smell, taste, and touch? Notice, we know this. We know that the environment, the sensory environment has to be controlled for when you want to achieve something. That's why a classroom, for example, is different from a rock concert. A movie theater, for example, is different from a meditation hall. We know that in order to concentrate the mind, in order to focus, in order to calm the mind, you need to control the external sensory environment. So this is what Krishna is saying. Once you control that, then he goes to the next step. So the horses are controlled, but for that now you must internally control the mind, which controls the senses. To control the horses, you need to control the reins. Now here he does not mention it explicitly, the role of meditation, but he has a whole chapter coming up. In the Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter is about meditation. In the Upanishadic source, in the Kathopanishad, it is clearly mentioned that the reins of the chariot, which control the horses, that is the mind, which controls the body, the senses, the mind has to be mindful. In fact, the exact word is used in the Upanishad, samanaska, which literally translates into the popular modern term, mindful. So the mindfulness, which is very popular today, it's a huge industry now. Thousands of years ago, in the Kathopanishad, and after that Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, he talks about the importance of tranquility of the mind, management of the sensory input, followed by tranquility of the mind, and then finally self-knowledge. He says in the verse number 43, Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanam jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Awaken to the real self, which is beyond the intellect. So here he indicates, he gives a pointer. How do you attain self-knowledge? You realize that you are not the external objects, obviously. You are not even the body and the sensory system. You note that inner to the body and the sensory system, subtler than that, is the mind. Even that we are not, because inner to the mind, subtler than the mind, is the intellect. If you ask what is the difference between intellect and the mind, the intellect is exactly the faculty which we are using right now, for example, in trying to understand something. So that's the faculty. And that is something that introspects, that shines upon the mind. And beyond the intellect, inner to the intellect, subtler than the intellect, is the awareness which lights up the intellect and the mind and the sensory system, by which the entire universe is revealed to us. That awareness, realizing that awareness, so filling the intellect with self-knowledge, that I am not the body and mind, I am the ever-present awareness, stabilizing the self by the self, he says. So this requires, as Rabbi Brill was saying, commentaries are important. So what does it mean, stabilizing the self by the self? It means filling the self, which here refers to the intellect, with the knowledge that I am the Atman. And then with that, you make the mind serene, mindfulness. And with the serene mind and the self-knowledge and the intellect, the senses are brought under control. And therefore, he says, slay, O mighty armed one, the enemy in the form of desire, which is difficult to conquer. Putting it all together, what did Krishna say here? The problem is, why can't we transform our knowledge, our spiritual knowledge, into practical action? Why is it so difficult to be good? The answer Krishna gave was because it's of unchecked. The problem is of unchecked desire. We can't control that. How do you control that? And then Krishna gives this model. It's at 3 levels. One is sensory management at the level of the senses. One, the mindfulness at the level of the mind, and self-knowledge that I am Brahman or I am the Atman at the level of the intellect. And putting them together, we attain enlightenment, the realization of our true nature. So overcoming desire, transforming our spiritual knowledge into practical wisdom, and ultimately attaining enlightenment. I think that's all I have time for. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Amol, your microphone is mute. Your microphone is mute.
Dr. Amar, your microphone is muted.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Swami Sarvapriyananda. Everyone, please respond to this survey question on the right. It is now my honor to introduce our next distinguished speaker, Swami Samachitananda, the president of the Ramakrishna Mission Singapore. The Swamiji joined the Ramakrishna Order monks in 1982 in India. He was assigned to the Singapore mission as its vice president from 2001 to 2016. In 2016, he was assigned as the vice president of the Order's Center for Buenos Aires in Argentina. In 2018, he was again called back to Singapore and was made president of the center. He gives regular talks on various religious and spiritual topics in Singapore and other Southeast Asian countries. The Swamiji is also a council member of Inter-Religious Organization IRO of Singapore. Ramakrishna Mission is one of the founding members of IRO Singapore. So Swami Samachitananda ji, please begin. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And before me, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji spoke. We belong to the same order, and you will find continuation of the subject here. So today I will spend some time with you on Bhagavad Gita and our spiritual life. I like to give this analogy of a lift in a building, in a multi-story building. The lift can take you from level 1 to the top level. Every level, the person has the right to say that lift brings me here. But the purpose of lift is to take person to the next level. This is the important aspect. Wherever you are, you need to go to the next level. That what, with compared to Bhagavad Gita, this is what the spiritual life is all meant about. We take help of the scripture, just like we take lift, and go to the next level or any higher level, which is your purpose. Bhagavad Gita is interpreted in many ways and is used in the modern management or any other aspect. Bhagavad Gita has a capacity to take you to the highest level, that is of level of enlightenment. Bhagavad Gita, Adi Shankaracharya, he puts, Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the scriptures, Hindu scriptures. Bhagavad Gita is a guidebook to lead the spiritual life. Everything pertaining to enrich our life and the training of the mind is given in Bhagavad Gita. Now, when we talk about spiritual life, I believe that religions are different paths. We call them different religions, but spirituality is not different. Spirituality is something universal. The basic values of spirituality is practically the same. Even the path, which is mentioned differently, because the religions were founded in different regions with different languages and different geographical regions. Because of that, the similes, the example, the languages are different. But the main idea behind the scripture to lead a man to the highest spiritual enlightenment is what the goal of all the scriptures practically. So here we will see how Bhagavad Gita is useful to us to make our life more and more spiritual. What is spiritual life? Life which is spent, the time which is spent to improve the spirit. This very interesting fact, when you say, I myself, I'm so handsome, that means you talk about your body. I'm very intelligent, you talk about your mind or about your intelligence. In the same way, we have no idea about ourselves. With the scriptures tell what we are. That's why you will see the me and mind goes away when person becomes spiritual, because he doesn't identify himself with the body or his intellect or his mind, but he identifies himself with the self. So this apparent ego is not seen in realized soul or the person who has been enlightened. One very interesting fact which we need to understand is the study of the scriptures, like Bhagavad Gita. It becomes meaningful when we practice it, when we practice the teachings. If you are a scholar of Bhagavad Gita, or if you are a scholar of the Holy Bible, or if you are a scholar of Quran, doesn't make you spiritual that you know so many verses or you know so many passages from the scriptures. Until we practice that in our life, the teachings remains the information. Here I will like to give a small analogy. We have a lot of information about the scriptures or about anything. But when that information, when those teachings are put into practice, then that information is slowly converted into knowledge. The information and knowledge are different. Knowledge becomes part and parcel of your life. Information you may forget. Information can be revived. Information can be improved. But once when information becomes knowledge, that becomes part of you. And that's the beauty of knowledge. Once one senior monk told me, when you understand that when you read Bhagavad Gita and when you feel that Krishna is telling this Bhagavad Gita to me, for me to practice these verses, to me to practice these teachings, then you have started understanding Bhagavad Gita. For example, when we read Bible, we must feel that Jesus is telling it to me. In the book, Jesus may be telling to someone, but actually it is meant for me. When we identify ourselves with the teachings of the scripture and trying to follow it and trying to practice it, that makes our life spiritual. Swami Vivekananda, the founder of our order, he says, you can mug up the whole library. You can recite all the scriptures by heart practically, but that doesn't make you spiritual. He says, take a few ideas and practicalize those ideas in your life. That will make you spiritual. Definitely, it is good to read the scriptures and varieties of scriptures and understand the scriptures. As I was telling, that if someone wants to kill somebody, he may need so many different weapons. But if somebody wants to kill himself, he needs a small knife or a small pin could be enough. This example is given by Sri Ramakrishna. Let us translate this from spiritual point of view. If you need to explain to somebody, you need help of many scriptures. But for your own spiritual understanding, just take up a few small teachings and leave those teachings in your life. That makes you spiritual and takes you upward. Another fact of life is, we talk about God, every scripture talks about God, every religion talks about God. Realization of God as an object, as somebody, not part of me or not me, as Vedanta says. An objective God exists or not. Until you realize, you may say, I believe in God, but I have not realized what God is all about. But one thing very clear, one thing is very sure, one thing all of us have experienced is that the world in which we are living is transient. As Lord Buddha says, Sarvam Kshanikam Kshanikam. Everything is temporary. Everything is in a state of flux. Everything is moving, and that movement gives us the notion of the existence of the object. Everything is moving, everything is continuously changing. One who perceives this change is unchanging principle, what we call Atman. So we have to start the journey from where we are. Where we are is, we know that this world is transient. We know people are born, we know people are dying. The lifespan of things are so small, the life is so fragile. Who knows it better than all of us who are in this generation, who are living in 2020? Look at the pandemic which is going on. Life is so fragile. The person whom you have seen 1 week before, today it doesn't exist. Life is so fragile. It is so impermanent. Once we have realized, not as an information, but as a knowledge, that yes, I also was a child, now I have grown. I will become old. A time will come when I will leave this body. Scriptures will help us to understand this truth, as Bhagavad Gita says, that this world is impermanent and full of misery. To follow the path of Dharma or to follow the path of God is the only way. Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says in chapter 9, shloka, verse number 33, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvama. This world is impermanent. This world is transient and full of misery. Swami Vivekananda, as I told his name earlier, he says, even the happiness comes, even the misery comes with the crown of happiness. You feel it is happiness, eventually it is misery. So our understanding should be there, which in reality is beneficial to me, in reality which is not beneficial to me. So Sri Krishna says to live the spiritual life is that which is important. Secondly, life is a journey. We are afraid. We are afraid of death. Sri Krishna says very clearly in second chapter on 13th shloka, like childhood, youth, the old age are the stages of life. Death is just another stage which links us to the next birth. As you know, Asian religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, they believe in reincarnation. So he says in this shloka, Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara prapti dhira tatra namuhyati. A wise man is not perturbed by this death because he knows that also is a stage which pushes me to the next life. One very interesting aspect we must understand for our spiritual life is the cause and effect relationship of everything what we do. Sri Krishna says that whatever action you do, as Dr. Amar told in the beginning itself, we do three kinds of actions: the mental, the verbal, and the physical. Whatever action we do, many times when we talk to the devotees, we say this: if you can help people, if you can serve people, good. If you cannot serve, don't increase your negative karma mentally, verbally, or physically by hurting or harming anybody. Sri Krishna says we should be very conscious about that. To follow the righteous path, just now, as Swami Sarvapriyananda mentioned, that our spiritual life begins with our practice of purifying our mind by reducing the desire. It is difficult to say complete removal of our desires because it is extremely difficult, but we can reduce it by understanding the state of affairs, what we see in this world, that everything is temporary. Secondly, unselfishness. We have to be friendly towards others. Even if my opinion doesn't match with yours, that doesn't make me your enemy. I accept you as you are. You have different views about God. You have different views about religion. You may have different views about the world, but our views can differ. That doesn't make us enemy. And in our personal spiritual life, we have to identify ourselves with our positive aspect, not with our negative aspect. We are human beings. We are full of faults. We have a lot of weaknesses, shortcomings, but we identify ourselves with our good qualities. That's what Sri Krishna says in chapter 6. Atmevahi Atmano Bandhu. You are your own friend. Atmevari Puratmana. You are your enemy. So let us be friends with ourselves. That will make us friendly with others. To be unselfish and to be spiritual in nature is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. In a very short span, I felt this should be really the connection between Bhagavad Gita and our spiritual life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swami Samachidananda ji. We appreciate your speech. Everyone, please respond to the Swami's survey question in the chat feed. It is now my pleasure to introduce Professor Vinitha Sinha, Head of Department of Sociology at National University of Singapore. In her talk today, she will examine recent efforts that have been made to present the Bhagavad Gita as a meaningful manual for modern living. She will present that many thinkers have argued that the ethical principles embodied in the text, conventionally seen as carrying a moral religious philosophy, are indeed relevant for negotiating fields of economy and business in the present. In abstracting strategic thinking from the Bhagavad Gita that can translate into the principles of management, human relations, and entrepreneurship is her presentation. So I present Professor Vinita Sinha.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone can see my slides. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be here. And I want to thank the organizers of the event and especially Dr. Charles Chow for inviting me to be a part of this symposium on the Gita. I'm a bit of an outlier on this program, given that I'm not a religious studies or a Hindu studies scholar, nor a religious specialist or expert. I'm an anthropologist and sociologist of religion. Specifically, my research explores manifestations of Hinduism in the diaspora, intersections of religious domains with the realm of popular culture and visual culture have been complicated with the influx of new technologies such as digital media and increasingly the internet into religious and spiritual fields. Rather than overwhelm the reach of technological innovations, especially digital media, and their impact on sociocultural and religious dimensions of daily life have now been normalized. The intriguing presence of religions and religion-related phenomenon on the internet has been growing and continues to inspire scholarly inquiries. The embrace of the internet has been documented across practitioners from a range of religious traditions, Islam, Christianity, Catholicism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Hinduism, as well as adherents of new religious movements. Cyberspace has been approached as a different and a novel medium for disseminating information, for advertising and publicity, for religious products, and indeed for marketing religions themselves. One aspect of my research examines how religious practitioners have embraced elements of capitalist digital worldviews and also refashioned their religion to make it relevant and meaningful in the present. It is against this background that I will say a few words about the Gita, which has been interpreted in recent decades as a manual for modern living. I will use concrete examples to demonstrate how this ancient text continues to have a vibrant presence in cyberspace and how its teachings and philosophy continue to be represented, discussed, and debated. This new presence on a new medium for an ancient text seems to have tremendous appeal for Hindus and non-Hindus alike. Of course, the idea of reinterpreting ancient mythology for contemporary times is not new. Here in this book called Myth and Mythia, a handbook of Hindu mythology by Devdutt Patnaik, he gives us advice that modern organizations should empower employees by helping them to create wealth and learn new skills, that one can decode the wisdom of mythology for the benefit of business. And he turns to the use of mythology to understand human behavior, brands, advertisements, and argues that one can use mythology to leverage their use in business, finance, and management. Now, I will not say much more about the Gita itself, given that other speakers better qualified than I have articulated the core philosophy and moral precepts carried in this text. The essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the divine song carried in a 700-verse poem, is a dialogue between Prince Arjun and his charioteer Krishna. It deals with the concepts of dharma, karma, jnana, bhakti, moksha, and yoga, and of course deals with the inner conflict and moral dilemmas, the ethics of violence and killing, ultimately defined by a call to selfless action. In this dialogue between Arjun and Krishna, the Gita is infused with the spirit of questioning and the need for attentive listening, both of which are presented as virtues to be emulated. In the time that I have, I will turn to some concrete examples of how the Gita has been interpreted and made available on a medium of the medium of the internet. Entering the word Gita in any search engine today generates hundreds and thousands of websites and links. One finds numerous blogs, YouTube videos with lectures, workshops, mindfulness and motivational sessions organized by universities and private corporations alike, as well as TED Talks on the Gita. These add to the hundreds of commentaries and analysis of the text in the form of self-help, do-it-yourself articles and books as ebooks, audiobooks, Kindle, and of course print versions. The Gita seems to be a veritable and inexhaustible source and has something to say about a vast number of themes and subjects, as has already been pointed out by several of the speakers earlier today. In the few minutes that I have to speak, I will discuss a few broad subjects. Some may appear more surprising than others, under which the Gita has been discussed and indeed presented as a universal, timeless, practical, as well as a spiritual text in tune with modern living. And I show how different authors and personalities have tried to abstract practical lessons from the Gita that are relevant for making sense of and negotiating contemporary life. So the first category I want to look at is management styles and leadership skills. There are any number of books today, and I have just made a random selection of these 3 books that you see on the screen here, which try to teach how one can develop business practices. In addition to these 3 books that I've listed here, and there are many more than the 3, there's also a large number of YouTube videos that one can go to where one finds management paradigms from Bhagavad Gita, inspirational leadership and lessons from the Bhagavad Gita. And these YouTube videos and books are extremely popular. You can see the YouTube videos popularity by the number of views that they receive, and this the reach of the internet is clearly enormous, and it reaches out to audiences of a huge background and demography. These books, these videos and books collectively list a number of skills that can be learned from the Gita, and these skills include discipline, moderation, toleration, and selfless work. The Gita, it is said, deals with matters of success and prosperity and is relevant to economic spheres of life. It teaches one how to interact with others. One important lesson that is abstracted from the Gita in these books and videos is this whole question of how one can be a good leader, how to lead. It spells out how one can be a good leader without being an authority figure. So some of the elements of being a good leader include spelling out all the options that are available to individuals, as well as the consequences of their chosen paths, but really letting the person make the choice themselves, an informed choice. So it's good leadership is not about telling people what to do, but really helping people to decide on their own what they think the best path should be. It is also about motivating others to take ownership in their work and feel a sense of pride. Individuals are encouraged to set goals and missions that are bigger than material success, and the argument is that if this is done, prosperity will follow. The Gita, therefore, it is said, teaches how to manage oneself as well as the work and external environment, as well as personal relationships. These books and videos really speak to this question of how to do business with ethics in place. This is really argued as being relevant for business leaders because this teaches decision-making, planning, and self-motivation. The second set of material that I want to look at really deal with this question of morality and ethical principles. which is, how can one live life according to the precepts of the Gita. And here, some of the material that is really important to look at is well, this one particular book called The Difficulty of Being Good, The Subtle Art of Dharma by Guru Das, published in 2010, is a hugely popular text which interrogates the concept of Dharma, which is central in the Gita. The Dharma is mentioned in the very first verse of this 700-verse poem. And of course, the notion of Dharma is very complex, but also very elusive, as has already been pointed out. It is often referred to as doing the right thing or doing one's duty and acting purposefully, but with detachment and disinterestedness. It refers to selfless action and indifference to pain and pleasure. These are presented as virtues in the Gita. Guru Das explores this, the Gita as well as the Mahabharata from many different perspectives and compares the successes and failures of the poem's various characters with contemporary individuals, many of them well-known leaders in the world of economics, business, and politics. The third category that I want to look at, and I think, in my survey of material, this was the one that I found most number of books on, and these books like Living the Bhagavad Gita, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Life, or 7 Lessons from the Bhagavad Gita by Govind Chopra are really interesting and speak to the lessons that can be derived from the Bhagavad Gita. According to Govind Chopra, the Gita contains timeless wisdom, and key messages from the texts are presented as a guide to self-inquiry into what it means to live a purposeful and meaningful life. Chopra deconstructs key verses from the Indian Holy Book in the context of the 21st century and argues that its key messages about self-control, self-knowledge, and self-realization and selfless action are more important than ever in today's difficult contemporary living. There are also a number of YouTube videos that are available for people to browse and watch. I'm sorry I can't show you the videos, but you can see that they're very popular, some of them with 75,000 views. And these books and videos together present the lessons from the Gita. Some of the lessons are presented in lay accessible language and in English. They try to retain the essence of the Sanskrit verses, but they present it in simpler language. So some of the lessons are working hard but remaining unattached to the outcome. Your mind can be your best enemy or your best friend. Happiness is a state of mind. Consider the middle way, or the true nature of reality is unknowable, etc. So, I just wanted to give some very concrete examples of what is out there in terms of the Gita and how the Gita has been represented and interpreted in today's context. And let me share some concluding thoughts now with, let me share some concluding thoughts. Religions continue to thrive today with a vibrancy and dynamism that would no doubt astonish both the 19th century European social thinkers who anticipated the eventual end of religion in an age dominated by capitalist markets, modern science and technology. Drawing inspiration from such logic, secularization theorists of the 1960s and 70s boldly sounded the death knell for religion. But clearly neither institutionalized religion nor private religiosity have been laid to rest with the rise of rational modernist tendencies. Religions show a resilience and the capacity to transform themselves, and have shown themselves to be quite adept at embracing the capitalist market, technology, digital, virtual, and internet worlds. I have used the case of the Gita to make this larger point. One key significance of the selective interpretations of the Gita I've shared today is that the poem is not necessarily approached as a holy book or a sacred text. Instead, it is seen to be relevant for managing many aspects of life which would be considered secular and profane. For example, many of the authors and commentators I've cited argue that a religious text need not only deal with spiritual matters, that the teachings and messages of the Gita have relevance for profane, everyday practical matters, including the world of economics, business, and politics. The strong refrain we hear is that an ancient, timeless text is also a universal text and is a valuable compendium for practical lessons as well as ethical insights that are very meaningful for negotiating the complexities and ambiguities of contemporary life. Thank you very much for listening. I'm done with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sinha, for sharing your insights into the way in which the ethical principles of the Gita are being applied to economic, business-related, and political issues in our own time. At this point, too, I would kindly remind our participants to answer the survey questions that have been provided for the presentations. Now we move to the question and answer part of the program. We will begin with a question from Fra Go, a monk who in 2008 received bhikkhu ordination into the Theravada tradition of the Thai Dhammayut sect at Santi Forest Monastery in Johor, Malaysia. In 2013, he became a youth member of the interreligious organization in Singapore, and he currently serves as a religious advisor for the Buddhist Youth Network and the Singapore Polytechnic Buddhist Society. Welcome, Fra Go. Please pose your question.
Greetings to all the distinguished speakers, and thank you for having me here. I've been asked to ask a question on the Varnas, so here is the question. How is the caste system of birth staying relevant with the modernization of culture, where more people start to talk about democracy and human rights, or when people get jobs not related to their caste? Thank you.
So should I respond? I think that question was yes. Thank you for that question. This question sometimes comes up in the context of a discussion of the Bhagavad Gita, the question of Gita and the caste, and primarily because Krishna at one point mentions that he, as the divine, is the source of the caste system. So does the Bhagavad Gita, in a larger context, does Hinduism teach caste? Is caste a central feature of Hinduism? The answer, straight answer, is no. Often scholars identify caste with Hinduism. The mistake is understandable, but it is a mistake. Swami Vivekananda clearly said that caste is a social construct. There was some social necessity at some time, and then it became a part of, sometimes a perverted part of society over the centuries and the millennia, leading to many abuses, leading to concentration of privilege in the hands of some elites. So all of that. So he said that one day the caste system will go, and the society has no need of it anymore. Hinduism does exist and will continue to exist without the caste system. The Gita is perfectly valid. None of its central teachings are in any way vitiated if you do not have caste. In fact, I would say a caste-like society is actually much closer to the Gita's central teaching. Why would Krishna mention caste at all? The answer is that it's more of, there's a word in Sanskrit called anuvada. In Indian languages, it means translation, but in philosophical Sanskrit, it means a description of reality. What you see in reality, you repeat when you are trying to explain something. So Krishna was just using the structure of society as it existed at that time. So when he's trying to say that everything in this universe is created by the divine, or everything is an expression of the divine, so the society, human society too, is an expression of the divine. Yes, caste is not related to birth. Notice, when he was asking the question, he used the word varna. Varna means the caste system. Jati means caste by birth. So the question was, how is varna related to caste and birth? It is not. They're two different things entirely. A natural division of the differences among human beings. We have different tendencies, different likes and dislikes, different propensities. That in a more formal system is what is called caste or varna. But jati is a system that evolved over centuries. You're born as a child in a Brahmin family, you become a Brahmin. You're born a child in a Shudra family, you become a Shudra. That's jati, but that's not the caste that Krishna was talking about. Krishna talks about the varna as the inherent tendencies within us, guna and karma, the occupations. As the Prabhupada pointed out, occupations have also changed over the centuries. Now there is no compulsion that a person of a particular varna has to follow a particular occupation. All of them are open. Let me also point out that by the Constitution of India, any kind of discrimination on the basis of caste is actually illegal. It's absolutely prohibited. So my point is the Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism, in a more general sense, Hinduism itself is continuously in a process of moving beyond the caste system, certainly beyond the abuses of the caste system. Yeah, I hope that suffices. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Swami Sarvapriyananda. We turn now to the questions that have been selected from those that were submitted by our participants before the symposium. Once again, thank you for providing your questions, and we apologize that they cannot all be addressed during our short time together in this symposium. The first question submitted is for Swami Samachittananda. It comes from a participant from the United States. With an increase in atheistic belief in today's world, how can a mystical/religious scripture like the Gita, that is rooted in the idea of life or lives after death, grab the attention of those who simply do not believe in the afterlife? Swami Samachittananda.
Okay. As I mentioned in my speech here, that the concept of reincarnation is very prominently mentioned in the Eastern religions. You don't find in Semitic religions. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. I'm not telling from the fanatic point of view that if you don't believe it is wrong, or if you believe it is true. But the idea is this, that because of our senses, because of our information, because of our capacity to explore the external world or the present world, we do not find that there could be reincarnation. We don't have this notion that I will be born again. That's why we don't accept, and we call that illogical. But in the modern time, so much study is done. In Eastern, it is belief and it is accepted that there is reincarnation. If there is no reincarnation, the very karma theory cannot be applied. Why do you think we should not be lead exclusive selfish life, kill each other, and just get maximum from this world? There is a fear from inside that this is not correct. What is that? What is that discrimination in a positive sense, of course? That I am able to discriminate good and bad, moral and immoral. I want to be better. To be better for what? Even a saint will die, or the sinner also will die. If the death is the final end of everything, then why do you need to be better? Why you need to be moral? Swami Vivekananda has given a speech on why should we be moral. Secondly, idea is this, that I personally feel, I'm not thrusting my idea on you, but if you see the world around us, as I was telling, the transitoriness of the world, if there is no reincarnation, there is no way for me to correct myself. If I cannot be perfect in this life, that means I will remain imperfect throughout the eternity. So the reincarnation gives me a kind of solace that even if I die imperfect, I have another chance to perfect myself. Secondly, another hypothesis could be this, that we are all born different. Think of a person who is born with a silver spoon in the mouth, perfect health, no financial problem, no any kind of issues from the society, compared with the other person who is born lame, without limbs. Why God should be partial? God cannot be partial. So the karma theory and the reincarnation theory says this, that probably, we don't have a proof, probably it is fruit of my karma. And when person suffering because of that, it is my karma who is seeing them to serve them and help them. That makes the whole cycle complete. So in the modern time, if you ask me, we try to make people understand this, not the with trust idea. Who knows? I don't remember my past birth. I do not know whether it will be my next birth. But idea is this, that this idea of karma and reincarnation makes my life more meaningful, more purposeful. Even if I die imperfect, I have a chance to improve myself and till I realize the truth. Hope I have answered.
Thank you, Swami Samachittananda. Our next question is for Rabbi Brill, and it also is asked by someone in the United States. Do you perceive any essence of universality in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita? How can these teachings be applied to other cultures and religions?
Well, I think that was my talk. If that was given beforehand, I definitely do see a great deal of universality. In a longer version of this, America, using more Christian language, moves from exclusivism to an inclusive position. But there is, from a Jewish, Muslim, Hindu perspective, there is a sense of a universality. Once you start speaking about the soul and the journey of the soul and what it does, it generates this idea of universality. And that goes back in Jewish texts to both antiquity, to the Middle Ages, journeys of the soul, this idea of universality. The application of this to other faiths is a certain method of patiently sitting with the other faith and asking it, where am I really similar and different? What can I hear from it? What can I both enrich myself and at the same time understand that I'm different? And I think there's a whole field going on now of not just saying how can I overcome prior exclusiveness, but actually listening to the other. And because of that, I just want to point out one more thing, that whatever you say about other religions, Judaism has reincarnation. Okay, reincarnation is part of Judaism. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Brill. We have time for probably one more question, about 5 minutes. This is to Dr. Amar from a participant in Canada. And the question is, how can we implement spirituality in our daily life by a few easy steps? Dr. Amar.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I think answer to this question indirectly was given by Swami Samachittananda. And application is what is important for normal person in normal life. We may or may not read the scriptures. We may or may not understand in detail what they say. But if we take the essence and try to apply them in our lives, we will be just fine. Like one thing that has been repeated here a couple of times now, that says mansa vachna karmana shuddhi shuddhi shuddhi. That means keep your first mind clear, mind pure. That means no malice in your mind. And if your mind is clean, that means you always at least be thinking about good things and virtuous things. And then vachana shuddhi, means your words should be pure, your words should be clean, your words should be virtuous, and you should be speaking things which are good rather than bad. And the third is karma. Now, whatever you can do so it turns out to be good. And by doing those things, you can do a lot of that. I will here, in response to this question, narrate what my mother told me. When I was young and I could barely read, my mother gave me the Bhagavad Gita to read. And I was like in the first grade, second grade, and Bhagavad Gita being given to me, and I started to read. I could not understand. What I liked is because after every chapter, there was a chapter called Mahatva, where they will simply tell a story interpretation of what was in the chapter. I like that. So my mother said, read whatever you can, as you like, read more carefully. But she said, don't skip anything. And I kept on reading, and I got a lot out of it. I think any human being, any young person, any person who does not have the depth of knowledge can start at a very first step and stay on, and they will end up getting a lot of spiritual message and a lot of what is required of our lives according to the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Dr. Amar. I want to thank all our presenters for their answers, and also to thank you, our participants, once again for submitting your questions. Now, at the beginning of the symposium, I asked you to answer the pre-symposium question. At this point, I would like to ask all of you who are in attendance to answer our final question, the post-symposium question. It's that same question. I have ideas about how the Bhagavad Gita can apply to contemporary life. We're interested in finding out whether your answer this second time is different from your first answer. Please be kind enough to answer that question now by clicking on the icon with the question mark and then on the link. And as soon as the results of the comparison between those pre and post symposium answers have been tabulated, I will share the results with you.
Okay, we will now proceed with our closing commentary and comments. And here we could say this has indeed been a global event. At the count so far, we had attendees from, in alphabetic order, Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Canada, China, France, Germany, Ghana, Greece, India, Indonesia, Israel, Italy, Japan, Malaysia, Nepal, Nigeria, Qatar, Singapore, South Africa, the Netherlands, Tanzania, Trinidad, UAE, West Indies, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. And I can tell you the list is longer than what I have recited. On behalf of my organizing colleagues, Dr. Charles Chow in Singapore and Dr. John Radman at Seton Hall University and myself, we thank all our speakers. Without their truly selfish commitment to this event, we would not have had such a nice turnout and so much interest in this symposium. There are many other people without expressing our gratitude to whom we cannot close this event. I will start these names for Singapore first. The first one on this list is M. Krishna Kumar, Raj Seeger, Fra Ko, Chun Kiang, and Jane Ong. On the USA side, we thank our producer Burke D. Loxley, Mike Supios, Lorraine Joyce, and Dean Deirdre Yates of Seton Hall College of Communication and the Arts. We close now with a message of serenity that will begin, and that is a message titled, I am indeed that eternal knowledge and bliss. That will begin after I stop, and I'm going to stop with a couple more important things. And on behalf of Seton Hall's Institute for Communication and Religion and Singapore's Gita Jayanti Committee and Hindu Endowment Board, we thank you all for attending this 2020 Bhagavad Gita Symposium. And then, because of the courtesy of Singapore Gita Jayanti, they have provided honor and recognition for those who have organized, and their honor is in the form of a memento. I'm going to show you this, and I assume you can all look at this, and all these names who I am going to read soon, they will be receiving this memento as a souvenir of having participated in this Gita Symposium. And their names are Dr. John Radman, Dr. J. Michael Stebbins, Dr. Alan Brill, Swami Sarvapriyananda, Swami Samachitananda, Professor Vinita Sinha, and Muhammad Imran. So with all that, with the courtesy of the Gita Jayanti, the success of this symposium has encouraged us to make more attempts. I would also like to mention Shamaru. Shamaru had run this live on YouTube and on Facebook with a total subscriber rate, number of 4 million. And from my past experience with them, I know many thousands have been watching in addition to those who have been registered here. And I thank you in behalf of my colleague John Radwan and Michael Stebbin, everyone who has been engaged in this effort. It was in fact something that we have been dreaming and working on for many months, and we finally realized it. Thank you so much. Now the music.
Special thanks to everyone. I think we can all agree that today's symposium has been an illuminating one. Coming from Singapore, one of the world's most religiously diverse country, and being deeply involved in interfaith work personally, I have to say that today's session is truly groundbreaking, in particular because Singapore has a deep historic connection with the Hindu tradition and culture. Today's session reminded me of Singapore's pre-modern Hindu-Buddhist identity and cultural manifestations embedded in the maritime Malay civilization that encompass this island through the Majapahit and Srivijaya kingdoms. It is time for us in Singapore to also be reacquainted with this aspect of our historical identity. But history is just one element. It also holds lessons for us in the contemporary period. And throughout the conversations today, two main points stood out. One, we saw that the Bhagavad Gita is not just a sacred Hindu text, but a sacred heritage for all of humanity. It contains wisdoms and a profound message that can guide humanity. It is truly a shared spiritual and universal tradition, one that belongs to all of us. Two, we've heard how the Gita tradition is well placed within a pluralistic environment, and how a text is both ancient and contemporary and speaks to and across the different religious and non-religious communities. In engaging with the text, it brings us to a creative synthesis of ideas including shared values. The Gita therefore serves as a source of inspiration to many in the pursuit of the divine as well as for practical application in our everyday living. Therefore, allow me to offer a huge thank you to all of our esteemed speakers today, including our moderator, Dr. Stebbins. Huge thank you also to the organizers, the Gita Jayanti Committee and the Hindu Endowments Board of Singapore, and the Institute for Communication and Religion, Seton Hall University, USA. Special thanks to collaborators, Professor Amar Dev Amar, Dr. John Radwan, Dr. Charles Chow, and Dr. Krishna Kumar, without whom this symposium will not have been possible. And of course, thank you all to all of our participants for joining us today and making today's session a successful one. Thank you very much.
न च श्रोत्र जिह्वे न च घ्राणनेत्रे व्योम भूमिर्न तेजो न वायु चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं न च प्राणसंनो न वै पञ्चवायुर्न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोशः रागौ न मे लोभमोह मदो नैव मे नैव मात्सर्यभावः न कामो न मोक्षः चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थं न वेदा न यज्ञः न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मे जाति भेदः पिता नैव मे नैव माता